Hey guys, Dave here. Today I'm going to give you a quick introduction to HTML programming in 15 minutes or less. HTML is absolutely essential if you're going to make websites or be a web developer. And good thing is it's pretty easy to learn. So at the end of the 15 minutes, you should have a rough idea of what to do if you're starting an HTML project. So the first thing you're going to need is an HTML document. These are really easy to make. You don't need any special software. You can even make one with a simple text document. To change this to an HTML file, all you need to do is save as, all files, index.html. That's a HTML file. But it's a lot easier to do it in an IDE, and you get some extra features, so that's how I'm going to show you in this tutorial. So right over here, I'm going to be using Visual Studio Code. So I'm going to open this folder, open with Visual Studio Code, and I'll make a separate video on how to install that and set that up with the settings I use here. Okay, so right over here, this opened the folder, and as you can see, it just shows a picture that I have in the folder right now. This is just the folder area. So same thing like the text document, I'm going to make a HTML file right now. So I'll go index.html. You can name it something else, but index is the standard name for the first page of the website or the main page. Okay, so just like editing a text file, I can type it in here. So the first thing you need when you're doing an HTML file is you need to specify the doc type. The newest version is HTML5, and that is what you should be using for everything. So, doc type, HTML, and that specifies HTML5. The next thing you need to know is HTML is made up with tags, and most tags have an opening tag and a closing tag. There are a few tags that are self-closing, but you don't need to worry about that right now. So all the tags in the HTML document are inside an HTML tag. As you can see, there's an opening tag and a closing tag. So this would be the opening tag, and this would be the closing tag. The closing tag, if you notice here, has a slash on it. The next thing you need is you need a head. In here you put links to style sheets and links to JavaScript files, and also the title of the document. I'll show you how to do CSS style sheet files and JavaScript files in another video. That's outside the scope of this tutorial, but those are really useful. So if you go title, and then you type, say, let's call it Owl Hobbies. Save it, and let's add a body tag. This is where you put all the content of the document, and let's call this Hello World. Save it. I'll just make that capital. Save. Now, if we go into the folder that I opened, and you click on it, you can see we have our Hello World right here, and we have the Hello World right here. This is an H1 tag. It's called it's the biggest header tag. It goes from header 1 to header 6. So there's H2, H3, H4, H5, H6. They're all written identically. This is the biggest one. You can also see that we have our hobbies right over here. This is the title of our document. If I change this to say our favorite hobbies, that will show up there next. There you go. Now it says our favorite hobbies. I should probably put a space. Refresh. Our favorite hobbies. Next thing you can do is you can do a subheader. So let's call this hobbies. So the subheader will use a smaller header tag, H3, hobbies, Save. If we refresh the page, there we go, hobbies. Now let's say we want to list our hobbies off. So I can use a paragraph tag, and that's just gonna put it in an unbolded format, paragraph format. So let's say my hobbies are hockey, soccer, and the beach. Save it. Refresh the page. Hockey, soccer, beach. But if we're gonna do a list, it might look a bit nicer if we use something called a list format. So we have these two elements called UL and OL. So UL is an unordered list and OL is an ordered list. So let's make a UL right now with this information. So UL. As you can see, my IDE is just auto closing it for me. That's like one of the cool features of having an IDE, or else you'd have to type it out manually. I'll show you how to do the auto closing tags in my IDE video on Visual Studio Code. So we wrap it with a UL, and now we have LIs inside the UL, and those are the list items. Unordered list, list items. So I'll go hockey, copy that, soccer, and beach. And as you can see, all of these have a closing tag. Now if I save it and I refresh the page, now it's in an unordered list, and you can see it put bullet points on it. If I want to make this an ordered list, I can go like this, change it. All I have to do is change it to OL, save it, refresh the page. Now we got numbers. That's pretty cool. What if I want to add a picture? No problem. All I gotta do is image, source, and we have an image over here, beach.jpg. Because it's in the same folder as my index.html, all I have to do is /. This is called a relative path. I'll make another video on relative paths later on that shows you some more features on the different paths and absolute paths and whatnot. But for all you know, if it's in the same folder, you can just do // and type in the name of the image, beach.jpg. There you go. And this is called a self-closing tag. So you don't need to give it a second one with the little slash. When I save it, it actually appends it for me, and I don't need to add in another closing one. And if I refresh the page, now we have a picture of our beach. Wow, that looks pretty. I can add a divider over here, like a line divider, make it a little bit nicer. That's called the H3 tag. It's another self-closing tag. So H3, I save it, and now we have a little line divider. So you'll notice if you look at the screen here, right now everything is on its own line. This is because elements like H1, the hello world, is something called the block element. In HTML, we have two main types of displays. These are called block and inline. And these are very important design concepts. So block elements take up the whole horizontal width they're on. So the hello world is taking up all this white space here, even though it's so small. If it was an inline element, and I wrote another inline element next to it, they would keep displaying along this line. So for example, say I had a span element. I wrote this is a span, and then I write another one, just copy it. This is another span. Now you're going to notice it's going to show up on the next line, and they're both going to be together because they're inline elements. The reason they go to the next line is because, well, above them there's a H1 element, so this is taking up the whole width. Now these are inline elements, so they can stand next to each other. You can modify the displays with CSS, and I'll get into that in another tutorial when I introduce you guys. This brings me to another important concept. This is the concept of divs. When you're writing HTML, you'll see divs everywhere. So a div is just basically a container that has a block level display. So here I write a div, and I put the hello world inside it. You won't see a difference because the div has no real styling besides its block level, and the hello world is already block, so it's gonna appear the same. So watch I refresh, the page looks exactly the same. But if I put the span in it, you're gonna notice a difference immediately. So let's say I put this span in it. Watch this. Save it, refresh the page. You can see that now the span is on a new line. This is because it's inside the div element. So let's walk me through it. We have the h1 element, hello world, takes up his own line. It's inside this div element. The span element, it can share a line. So for example, it's sharing a line with this other span. But because it's inside the div element, the div comes after the end of the span, and it pushes this other span to a new line because the div will take up the rest of this space here. That's a super important concept to know, because people use divs for containers for all types of things, for organizing page content, for putting headers and sections and all types of stuff in there. Hey guys, now I feel like you have a good grasp on the basics of HTML. We went over the basic page elements, H1 to H6 tags, ULs, images, basic display formatting. In a future video, I'll go over forms and tables because they're a little bit more complicated features of HTML. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like and subscribe and comment what you'd like me to make a video about next. Thank you.